Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 67 of Technically Trek, the OG Technically Trek. I am your humble host, Dave Prime, and over there on my left, or my right actually, is our ditzy witch, the Captain Katie. How are you doing today, my dear?
Alive. How are you?
Same, same. It's been a week. I say there's some that
Oh,
have been through a lot more. And we'll get into that in a minute if I can get this stupid
okay.
eye to stop itching. But yeah, it's been good. Same, but as I always say, another day without alcohol is a good day. I'm at 408 days of sobriety now, so that's just crazy. I said my home group next week. It's Giddy Up 409.
I am so incredibly proud of you, Dave. I really am. You are just amazing, and I
Well,
love you to pieces.
there have been some days where I just want to give up, but with the roof over my head, saying staying sober is a it's a good thing to keep in mind. So then going to keep on trucking, and then going to hopefully here in the next week or two get the internet redone here at the apartment so it doesn't lag as much and drop off like it has been the last couple of days because there's just one modem and it's in the apartment across the hall. So I got the the best worst spot, same, but it is what it is. But as I was
Yeah, but
just
hopefully you will get it sorted and hardwired so that you have a smoother internet connection. Because honestly, the amount of problems that I mean, even across the year, people have been having problems with the Wi-Fi, myself included, and Ethernet cables for the win.
yeah, say, but say the owners want me to be in the manager's unit, which is even further is downstairs, diagonal from where I'm at. So there's hardly any Wi-Fi whatsoever there. So either A, we got to figure out a way to either get the company to rewire it, put it in a more centralized location, and still have to deal with the Wi-Fi, or just say screw it and just get a second modem and put it into the manager's unit because there is a coax hookup in the bedroom downstairs. So that would certainly fix that problem, I think.
Hopefully.
But as I was just saying, those this is part of the DT family of shows, Dangerous Thoughts, with Manu and Tyson, and we were all set to go live again for season two after they were been dealing with a lot of technical issues trying to get the spending over 40 grand getting the new studio set up and whatnot, and then Manu's heterosexual life mate, the Lady Val, has been in hospital. And if anyone's been following Manu's campaign online, is that recently he's been kicked out of the hospital altogether, which is not cool. I mean, he has durable power of attorney. He's got all these legal rights, not just being her husband, which he should be in there. They're not letting him in. and they think they know what's best. They're saying all this stuff that's definitely not right. But saying so, not only does he have a GoFundMe set up to help pay for the medical bills that's just continuing to mount 2 weeks later, is that now there's possible legal repercussions that he's going to have to deal with and sue them blind. And saying so, hopefully it doesn't come to that. But in the description below, there is a link to help the Lady Val. Saying I didn't look before the show how far along they've gotten, but they still got a long way to go.
They
But
have, and I just want to say from across here in England, my mother and myself are sending so much healing to Lady Val and so much love and support for Manu because the situation that he's going through, the situation that Lady Valerie is in, it's not fair
no, it's not.
and something needs doing. So we are sending so much positivity towards Colorado
Mm.
and to them.
Yeah, the more the better. Even though I'm only a few miles away from like a couple miles, a couple thousand miles, or in your case, kilometers. And saying the more positive energy the both of them get, the better. But before we get too far into it, and since I kind of almost what
I work in miles.
okay.
I work in miles. I don't do kilometers.
Yeah, say, but yeah, that's but one of those weird things. Like some Brits do miles, some do kilometers. It's just like it's so confusing.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like I do meters, my mother does like feet and inches. And
Mm.
it's just like, no, it's meters.
But that being said, with any confusion and stuff, if you need some mental clarity of focus, check out my streaming partner Dubby. Which I mean, you got some just regular easy to say flavors, but then they got some more off the wall flavors like Grandpa's Ditcher Water. And say any code that you use the code Tech Trek at the bottom of the screen there, TEKTREK at w.gg, you get 10% off your order. And say so. Once I've been kind of working backstage a little bit trying to find some better scripting for that, but it is what it is. But and if you want to join the conversation live with us today, and say either just audio or video as well, so you can be online with us live. Say we're one of the only Star Trek podcasts that do welcome and enjoy the live interaction face to face, so to speak. And say just click on the StreamYard link below. That'll take you backstage. Then we'll get you all set up and good to go on that. But it's time to talk about our character of the week. Since I decided a couple weeks ago, we're going to talk about characters rather than episodes until we get to Strange New Worlds, which is coming up in 3 weeks. So I chose one too many characters for between now and then. So we're going to have to put Tom and Balana on the back burner for until after that show is over. But we're going to talk about the son of Mogh, House of Martok, son of Sergey, House of Rozhenko, bane to the Duras family, and the slayer of Gowron, the one and only Worf. From his humble beginnings at the con to security chief, ambassador, pacifist, he's probably one of the most well-rounded individuals in all of Star Trek, with a whopping, I think, 288 episodes from Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Picard, and then even the actor played his own grandfather in Star Trek Six. So let's dish about Worf. We'll bring in Tyson and Travis, who've been sitting backstage. How's it going, gentlemen?
Oh, it's going.
Good.
It's going. I forgot my comm badge. Thank you,
Yeah, I always
Travis.
forget. I always forget the my com badge. It's sitting on the fridge, holding up a receipt
I,
from
I
Walmart
figured
or
since
something.
we're gonna talk about Worf, the most recent appearance of Worf, so I broke out the Picard era
Right
communicators.
on. Yeah,
I
saying
need to
you
get
you
that one.
definitely
I'm
got
missing
quite
that
the
one.
collection of those, dude. See, my two main com badges are right up there. I got the next gen and the DS9 versions. It's the regular lapel pin. It doesn't have the magnet like all the modern ones, the newer ones do.
So
And I don't have one at all.
pre-com badge, what were they? Just insignia?
Yeah, they're etched in the uniform, but Strange New Worlds kind of threw that out the window.
Well, was it Strange New Worlds or was it Discovery? I think.
That too.
Because Section 3031 was using the tap insignia, and I remember them saying, "What the hell is that?" Anyway, um, but yes, no, I'm really excited to get to talk about Worf, and of course, we all want to wish Valerie Marie Biggs slash Leslie well. I feel just awful that she's in the hospital. Had several heart attacks. Uh, Came near death several times. According to Manu, actually died because her heart was stopped for several minutes.
20
Um,
minutes.
yeah, the fundraiser is already up to $9,191 of
Nice.
16,000 they're trying to raise. I know it was hovering around 8,000 just a couple of days ago. It's already up to 9,000. So to all of those who donated, and Captain Katie, yes, I did see your name on there. I am going to call you out. Several $100s came from you. Thank you. I know Manu loves that. Uh, I didn't go through a lot of them. Some people did anonymous. Um, I'm probably going to end up just sending money directly to Manu because I don't know. I think they take a little bit out when you do it through the charity. Like GoFundMe keeps some for themselves, and it's like 5%. I don't know, but thank you to everybody who has donated. I know it's going to make a big difference. He's got a lot of legal issues going on with regard to him being able to have that DPOA. Um, and making sure that he can get Valerie home safe and alive and taken care of. So thank you to everybody who has donated. Worf, we're here to talk about Worf. God, I loved him from the very first time I saw him on season 1, episode 1, Star Trek: The Next Generation, 1987. 1987. And Klingon, prior to that time, through all the movies, had always been the enemy of, primary enemy. Probably even more so than the Romulans. Those were the two main antagonists. But the Klingons, I believe, showed up first. And when they introduced the Next Generation, 100 years have passed, and apparently the Klingons and the Federation are allies, which, that was something. Boom, right? They started Encounter at Farpoint, the very first episode, with this, you know, uh, Klingons and humans are friends. What? And then that's explained a little more as the episodes go on. We learn about the battle at Kittimer and etc. The Kittimer Accords. That does predate Star Trek 6, which came out, what was it, 89 or 91? 91. 92?
Yeah, 91 is when, December 91 is when Star Trek 6 came out.
So that's, which again shed a little more light on Camp, and then Camp Kittimer. Really just love Michael Dorn. I don't know what it, he was lots of other Klingons, um, but Michael Dorn just really nailed it with Worf.
He did. He did.
Just
The amount of uproar that there was. Now, obviously, as everybody knows, I was very late to Trek. I was actually born the year Next Gen started in '87. But it, I did a lot of research, and I looked back on a hell of a lot, and the amount of uproar that there was when Next Gen started and there was a Klingon on the bridge of the Enterprise. And I was just, because, I mean, I did know some of the Trek history between, humans and Klingons and things, but I at the time, when I first started watching it, I didn't understand the animosity and why people were calling out. And I don't know how many people know this, but until what's her name who played Tasha Yar? Is it
Denise
Denise?
Crosby.
Denise Crosby, that's the one. Thank you. Until Denise Crosby stepped forward to speak to Gene Roddenberry about leaving the show because of the lack of character progression for Tasha, it was actually planned that Worf was going to be killed off because of the amount of uproar that it was caught, that like from fans and certain other people about a Klingon being on the bridge of the flagship. But because Denise wanted to leave, they killed off Tasha instead. And it did get leaked out that they were thinking of not necessarily killing Worf off, but that there was rumours that Michael Dorn was leaving the show. Now, this is only what I've read. I don't know how true it is, but there are certain things that do back this up as truth. It was leaked from what I've read. It was somebody leaked it out that Michael Dorn was leaving the show, and then all of a sudden there was an influx of fan mail for Worf, and it wasn't addressed to Michael Dorn. It was addressed to Worf, and also to Gene Roddenberry himself, saying, "Do not get rid of Worf. He is absolutely amazing. You know, Michael cannot leave the show." And nobody realized how popular, even just for like a dozen episodes or so, nobody on the show seemed to realize just how popular Worf had become in that short space of time. And his popularity just grew when he took over as head of security from Tasha.
And yeah, I think he gave us a peek behind the curtains because we always knew the Klingons were the enemies, right? But their customs, their beliefs, that was all, wasn't really covered in TOS. And so this
No.
really gave us that peek behind the curtain because we always saw them as kind of this authoritarian, there's plenty of episodes, I forget the TOS, where there was about to be a war with the Federation and there was this planet and they wanted to try to secure rights to the planet, but they were all pacifists, and then the Klingons show up, and then do you remember which one that was?
Let's see, you cut out for a couple of seconds. What was the question?
Where there was peace this is in the original TOS.
TOS.
Yeah, the Klingons and the United Federation had tried to work out a treaty. It fell apart. It looked like there was going to be war, and they had to secure a planet before the Klingons did. And there was a bunch of pacifists there, which later we find out they were omnipotent type beings.
The Day of the Dove?
It might have been that. In any event, that's probably the closest we really got to understanding, the Klingons until Worf came.
Yeah.
This is where we got to learn a lot about that. We got to learn why they had ridges and why they don't. And Trouble with Tribbles kind of teased it, but it wasn't later until Enterprise that we learned why they no longer have ridges. And then they got their ridges back. But here's the thing:
Trials and Tribulations in TNG.
Trials and Tribulations.
DS9.
Yeah.
DS9.
It was Trouble with Tribbles in TOS. It was Trials and Tribulations where we learned about the ridges. But here's some inconsistency. We later see in Strange New Worlds or Discovery that the
Enterprise.
Klingons did have ridges. And this would have been during the time when they shouldn't have had ridges. So there was some inconsistency, I think, there, whether they should or should not have ridges. Anyway,
Well, yeah, because Enterprise, they did the Klingon scientists were fiddling around with augment DNA and saying they wanted to have the Klingons kind of infiltrate Earth by appearing human, even though they were Klingons. So, and it just that experiment went sideways, and it mutated and started attacking all Klingons, regardless if they had the procedure. But then, obviously, Kor, Kang, and Koloth, I mean, the three principal Klingons from TOS, they had smooth foreheads. And then when they were reintroduced in DS9 by the same actors, they had their ridges again. So that just added confusion to what the heck. And then
Yeah.
when Enterprise came around, that's when they kind of explained it away.
Yeah,
It was
I've got
logical.
my own theories on the I've got my own theories about all of this confusion. And so many people don't agree with me on it, but that's absolutely acceptable. That is
I don't
absolutely
agree.
fine.
Sorry.
Exactly, you know, and I haven't even gone into it, but all this thing with the forehead, the no forehead, and all that, and obviously because of Enterprise, it was explained about the eugenics and
Mhm.
and all that. But regardless of it attacking all Klingons, regardless that this like virus or whatever it was, I can't remember that like smoothed out their foreheads, like, you know, extreme Botox is what I call it. Um, there would have been some, even just a handful, who it didn't affect, whether they were off world, what's the word, shunned, or whatever. There would have been some, like I said, even a handful, who weren't affected. And obviously, Enterprise was before Discovery. Season 1 and 2 of Discovery, obviously, like chronologically, is before Strange New Worlds, which is like directly prior to TOS. And yes, a lot of Klingons would have probably have still had the, you know, Botox effect. But there would have still have been some who didn't. Now, these Klingons that were in Discovery, yeah, fair enough, they were from different houses, but they were quite extreme in their beliefs. And even when they went to Kronos, because I think didn't Spock get drunk? When they went there, yes, the Klingons had ridges, but in my view, in TOS, you didn't really see a lot of Klingons anyway. In the grand scheme of things, you didn't really see a lot of Klingons. And by this point, it had been a while, so, you know, it had been very up and down. Tyson, that is just so bad.
We're doing
That
Klingons
is,
today, so I had to. I'm sorry.
I know, and I love you for it. But yeah, it's one of those things. Everything had been in flux, and that's how I like to explain things away. Because if you start, for me, myself, and I, if you start dissecting things too much, then you're just going to end up hating a show for no reason, all because you're dissecting it far too much. And you're focusing more on the like the possibility of inconsistencies that you don't believe can be explained away, rather than actually just watching it for the joy of watching Trek and watching a damn good show. And so I like to try and brighten the world up a little bit by coming up with theories that will explain everything so that people can be just like, well, I may not agree with it, but it gives me something to think about. I might actually just, keep that in mind while I watch the show and maybe I'll enjoy it. That's what I hope by coming up with these theories.
But yeah, getting on track with talking about Worf specifically, I think that probably the first episode, of course, would have to be a Code of Honor, which is the first Worf centric episode in all the Star Trek, because we kind of like learn a little bit more about Worf's culture and heritage and what he had to give up. What are you
Sorry.
cackling?
You're just gonna get a couple more Klingon jokes while we're here, and then I promise I'll quit. Promise I'll quit.
Well, side note is say one of the graphics editor for one of the high school papers that my newspaper traded with out of Montana made the joke that the Klingons have aquatred for heads.
Oh my god!
I say, Seth, if you're watching, hi. If not, I just called you out on it. But but
You guys never fail to cheer me up.
I mean, their foreheads look like a snow tire, so I guess
exactly
you know,
aquatred.
Yeah.
But
What was that? Wait, real quick. There was a Family Guy joke where they did a Star Trek cutaway, and Picard basically was voiced over by Sir Patrick Stewart, linked over to Michael Dorr, or not Michael Dorr, but Jonathan Frakes, and said, "Hey, won't you join with me in saying?" He said saying Mr. Worf's head looks like a fanny. And he's like, okay, yeah, and everything. Then he blurted out loud, Mr. Worf's head looks like a fanny. And everybody on the crew just on the bridge just busted out laughing. He said, "You are my ridges." He said, "Oh, get over yourself, Rocky Dennison."
That episode was hilarious. They go through the McDonald's drive-through. That was part of the thing, and it opens with their, it's a convention. They're all up on stage, and they're just asking random questions that have nothing to do with Star Trek. Like, my sponge starts to smell after a few days, and Patrick Stewart, oh yes, well, what you have to do is you have to rinse the sponge, wring it out, and let it air dry, and then it won't smell. Like, the fans were asking all these non sequitur, non Star Trek questions. And Stewie is getting really pissed off, and he had built this transporter, and he beams him to the house, and it was a really funny. It was a Star Trek Next Gen, right?
Yeah.
Travis. Yeah. Oh my God, that was so funny.
And I actually misspoke. I meant the Code of Honor. That was like one of the worst episodes of Next Generation. And Heart of Glory is the episode that I'm thinking of. Say where we get introduced to the death howl and all that, and it's some pretty interesting cinematography in that one, especially when the last of the Klingons that survived that the Enterprise rescued, and it just Worf howling into engineer, and it just like snap, 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 snap as it's going up the engine core. They are just but a husk. Dispose of them as such, or something to that effect. So I'm thinking even like some of the crew, the Enterprise was kind of surprised to see how that side of Worf that they've never seen before.
The one particular thing about Worf and everything. Worf has had an interesting character development because he's the only TNG crew member to appear in another show,
Mm-hmm.
for how many seasons? 5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Worf's development, go back from TNG, and when Tyson pointed out a couple of good things and stuff and everything about Worf's early upbringing and stuff and everything else. He was rescued from Kittimer, one of the first Federation starships to be upon the planet was the Intrepid, which Sergey Rozhenko was serving on. He ended up raising Worf in Russia. Worf went to the academy. He had basically a stepbrother or a
Yeah.
brother.
Yes, I think I don't
Is-
think it was. It was eventually it went to Russia, but the farming
Mm-hmm.
colony of Salt.
Okay, but he did grow up in. I remember he did grow up in Russia because he mentioned that to O'Brien at one point in TNG. He mentioned that to him. He also too about Worf's whole character development and everything else and stuff because he's the only, like I said, cast member to go from one show to another show. Watching this individual, this character, it really took on a whole new, like you have to point it out about people writing in about keeping Worf as a character and stuff and everything. In the third season of TNG, if y'all do remember this, The Sins of the Father, where he met his biological younger brother, Kern. We
Yes,
learn
I remember.
we learn
Yeah.
about Kern, and Worf learned about Kern in that episode, and we learn about the treachery of the Duras family, and we learn
Right.
about the duplicity of the High Council themselves and stuff and everything. Ezri Dax put it in a good way close to the end of DS9 about how corrupt the Klingon High Council is and how they accept corruptness at the highest level, covering up for the honor of the Empire and stuff and everything else. In a sense, we saw Worf discommodation. He accepted discommodation and stuff and everything. Even Picard at that time, we saw Picard stood by him. At that point, he wasn't his commanding officer. He was his Chadich, as is, stated and stuff and everything. And all the way through that time until the time he basically the right of succession, the Klingon succession, when Picard, basically, let's say, but Gowron won, and he chose, Gowron was put on the council and stuff by the, Klingon laws and stuff and rules and everything. It showed that Worf, he left the Enterprise to fight in the Civil War. We saw a lot of things that he went through personally. He had a son. We seen him have Kalar. Eventually, Kalar died. He raised his son in some ways, but then, his son, he sent his son away. His son came back.
It went away, came back, went away.
Yeah. And we saw his
Mother of the
transition
year.
too. We saw his transition into, like, he had a more bigger
just realized.
role in DS9. And one of the things too that stood out in DS9 for me, was not long after he got
You can probably hear me better now, huh?
there you go. Not long after he got to DS9, and he was on the I can't say on the show for but he was on the station for just a little bit. Something happened. He went from being in security command and stuff and everything to being the red, basically went back to red, which is command and stuff and everything. So the thing about that is, I watched Worf develop into such a interesting character from TNG to DS9. And one of the things that absolutely stood out to me, not only all his other stuff and everything else, but when the time comes when he had to choose again, he chose between Starfleet Federation and the Klingon Empire. Gowron basically, he basically kicked him, his brother, and basically, made the House of Mogh, that was one of the most fiercely named houses, in the Klingon Empire, to make them, pariah in the Klingon Empire. He took away their ships, their land, everything, that made them who they were. Their honor and stuff and everything. He stripped the House of Mogh of honor. Now, what I'm saying is, Worf went from, a character in a sense from TNG to DS9 in such a way that it is not seen in other character development, throughout any of the series that we're really seeing stuff and everything, because he was on two shows, that actually appear together at one point, for about 2 years, and once TNG went off the air, it was a short time before we seen season 4 where he appeared, in DS9 for the remaining part until the end of that series and stuff, which I was really impressed, because yes, he really broke out in the sense the character Worf broke out in a way in TNG, but DS9, it took it to a whole new level for me, for me to see Worf in that way. But I'll leave it to the floor.
Worf has one of the most interesting, for me anyway, Worf has one of the most interesting story arcs throughout Trek.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He went through a lot. Just building on what you said, Travis, it hit Worf very hard to be ostracized from Klingon society. And
excommunicated?
Yeah. But he never, regardless of how that made him feel, he never lost his sense of honor. And he always had honor. And I think that this is the one thing that I do not like about Klingons. I mean, I love them. I absolutely love them. But one thing that I don't like about them is how closed-minded they are. And they only see honor. They only see someone as showing honor when it benefits them. And that for me is very closed-minded, because Worf always held his honor and his loyalty above anything. And although his loyalties were to his heritage of being a Klingon, he was also very proud of his human upbringing as well. And he held his parents, even though they were a bit overmuch. I mean, I love his parents, I really do. His human parents, I absolutely adore them, especially his mother. Even though he was just like, just please, just, it was basically like, do not embarrass me. But even with that attitude, you could still see that he held them in very high regard.
Oh, absolutely.
And he always honored them for his upbringing. and he was very proud of getting into Starfleet, regardless of like every other Klingon's attitude. But when it came to Worf's honor, he honored those around him, you know, and that's why Klingons as a society can be very blind and closed-minded. And if it doesn't benefit them, if it wasn't in the name of the Klingon Empire, they don't want to know. That they just didn't seem to understand that it's not just about them and their own selfishness, because, you know, Klingons can be very selfish. More so than humans sometimes, depending on how, like, extreme they are. But he took it really well, all things considering, when he was excommunicated. And he got on with his life. And in some ways, he really didn't give a crap. Because he still had it, regardless of what the Klingons believed, thought, told him, spread around, you know, he knew he still had his honor. And that benefited Starfleet. That benefited those he worked with. And he still upheld, even though obviously he upheld the values and rules of the Federation, he never let go of his roots. Money. And that is something that I have always had a lot of respect for. He never lost who he was, regardless of what was thrown at him. And again, despite everything he went through and what was thrown at him, he made the best of a bad situation, and he carried on. He saw the silver lining, so to speak. You know, he may have been let go by that side, but this side kept him, held him close, supported him. And that is one thing that Klingons don't do. They don't show support. They're just out for themselves. And to build the pride of, it's stupid. It really is stupid.
It's to die in battle for the glory of getting the Stovel Core. You know, Ezri said the same thing. If you remember the episode where we saw he challenged in DS9 in the final season, he challenged Gowron, but not for the leadership of the Klingon Empire. He wanted to just kill Gowron, just get Gowron out of place and stuff and everything.
Attacking into the wind.
I think everybody did.
See, for the longest time though, I thought that was tracking into the wind, but then I said tacking's like, ooh, okay.
Do you remember? Even I believe Tyson can remember this too. You know, because we talked about this not long ago. Him and Picard had some choice words for each other on the bridge of the Enterprise E when they went back in time to stop the Borg from destroying, Vegas. And Worf pointed out exactly what Starfleet Command, what Admiral Hayes basically was saying, that's the reason why they sent the Enterprise to the Romulan neutral zone, is, Worf pointed the exact same thing out, and I'm like, you know what? That's exactly why, Starfleet Command and Admiral Hayes now said that they did not want him on the front lines, even though we knew he should be, but there was a possibility of him basically blowing up and stuff. And Worf called him out, and then Picard called him a coward. It was one of those things where it's like, oh my God, these two went at it and everything else. I was like, you know what? They had some choice words for each other, but I don't think they were they wasn't so much sorry that they said it, but they understood why each other said it and stuff and everything. That's one of the things too that I seen Worf with a commanding officer that he blew up on and stuff about with a commanding officer. And then there was one time, I'll let you talk. Hold on, Katie. And DS9, and I believe it was shortly after Worf got back to not got back. Oh shoot, it was in season 4, Rules of Engagement. Where basically the Klingons set Worf up to because he was commanding the Defiant, and he was in the convoy, and the Klingons attacked the convoy and stuff, and then this Klingon freighter with about 441 so-called survivors, and Worf ended up destroying the civilian ship, and the Klingons was demanding his immediate
Ed.
Yeah, and stuff, and they sent Tupac, which he was a really good advocate and stuff. And I watched him and Cisco go at it and stuff. But the one thing too that at the end, what got me was when they threw a party for Worf. Worf didn't want to go to the party, and Cisco came onto the Defiant, and Worf said to Cisco, you know what? He said, Tupac was right in his analysis about Worf. He had something to prove to himself, and others and stuff when he took on the mission to command the Defiant. And Cisco said, I'm glad you realized that. That was your first mistake. What was your second mistake? He said he should have checked the target before opening fire like he did. He said, you damn right you should have. You knew there were civilians in a shipping lane, and you opened fire without identifying your target. You just blindly opened. He said that was a military decision that you did. He said, what Cisco said, he said, we do not, the price of paying for you wearing the uniform that they do, it may cost them the battle. It may cost them their lives. That's the price they pay for wearing those uniforms and stuff and everything. They do not put civilians at risk or potentially at risk. And if that's the case, then they lose their lives, stuff. But yet civilians come first. You don't basically saying you do not open fire without identifying the target and stuff and everything. And Cisco, I like that little thing that they had. That to me, that was one of the most memorable thing between him and Cisco in DS9. Just like how one of the most memorable thing between Picard and Worf on the Enterprise D bridge is the realization of their error.
Yeah, but to go along that line, just when Worf made the comment about having an extra pip kind of puts a little extra weight on their decision making, and Cisco's just wait till you get 4 pips. You'll wish you've gone into botany. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's supposed to be a dig at Keiko or not, but I was like, damn, dude. Same, but yeah, Paige brought up an interesting question I got on the screen there. Just like, if aliens are so peaceful and loving, why, just like about the human ways, why are they so awful to each other? Is it learned behavior from us humans? I think it's just kind of, even though they're different species, they're just similarities. There's just some baseline prejudices. That's a word I can't say really quick every now and then. I don't hardly ever use that in my vocabulary, but I mean it's kind of like the nature versus nurture sort of thing, that every baseline, every species got their own thing. Go ahead, Travis.
Tyson go, I was gonna say before Tyson go, I want to hear if he got any kind of interesting thoughts and stuff of what we talking about, because I like to hear what he has to say before he has to jet.
There. I do like the DS9 one where he opened fire and he got shoot out, and then it turns out he did the right thing, and it was all a ploy. I also agree with when Worf, this is in the movie First Contact, if you were any other man, I would have killed you.
Yeah,
Worf,
I would kill you where you stand.
Yes, there is so much complexity. I mean, he can be kind and caring. He can also at times feel um, uh, distant or uncaring. You know, he's got these multiple facets to him. The one thing I don't think we've talked about yet is in Picard season 3, where Worf is actually the handler of what's her name,
Yeah,
Raffi.
Rafi,
Raffaella.
right, and it actually from I think episodes 3 to 10. You see, you know, a huge bonding over that and over you know, her trying to not do the drugs, but then she has to do a drug, you know, in front of a Ferengi for her to for him to believe her. Still doesn't believe her, and then Worf comes in and chops off his head. Right? Didn't blink an eye. Um, and then they capture the shapeshifter. Anyway, there's that whole season 3 Worf. Here he's much older, right? 30 years older, and you know, I
But still
remember
looking damn good.
towards the end he goes, I having never shed a tear myself.
Yeah.
You know, it was
Quick notes, have
so
no tear
yeah,
ducts, dude.
right. So it's, you know, it's just pretty great, you know, the way they ended Worf's character on Picard. Anyway, I do have to jet. I'm actually net control tonight, so I'm gonna jet a few minutes early. But bye, guys. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of the show. I will
You
watch it after the net.
Alan. Mwah.
Thank you, Tyson.
Uh,
Real quick, guys. You know what kind of got me with Tyson said something. He was like, you know, in Star Trek Picard season 3, Worf. Last time we see Worf, he was wearing a red uniform. He was a lieutenant commander.
Mhm.
And he was the ambassador of Kronos, as we, you know, the Federation ambassador of Kronos and stuff and everything. Jump almost what 20 years later
Mhm.
or so, he was wearing gold again, and he had 4 pips, and he was a captain. Now, what kind of, you know, I'm not trying to get like what Katie said, you know, too much into it, but I'm sitting there like, you know, anybody who wears a captain's pip, you know, will have a red. Will be in command. Command is captain or flag officer, but yet we see now. Sergeant Picard has thrown that because I thought about this, you know, tremendously, you know, because we've seen admirals wearing division colors that wasn't red, and they still have, you know, they still have admiral pips, but they do not wear, you know, they wasn't wearing just a standard red, you know, uniform and stuff and everything. Worf was wearing, you know, he had 4 pips, and he was wearing the gold, you know, the gold uniform, well, not jacket and stuff and everything else. But I was sitting there like, so are captains now colors going back to gold? Just not saying this to anybody who's, you know, watching this and stuff and everything else. I know it's just something that's just it's not a little, you know, nitpicking at, but it's just, you know, you would think that he would have been in the red jacket when we saw him in Star Trek Picard instead of the gold jacket, which, you know, I don't know how that even happened, or if that just got lost in, you know, their, you know, the people researching. Oh, should we, you know, make sure Worf jacket, you know, is the right color that we see, so people like me won't get so tripped up in like, so how did he go back to gold instead of red, and he's wearing a captain's pips instead of like a, say a commander's pips and stuff and
I
everything. It's just
I
one of those
think
things.
it might have just been a costuming decision. Now I'm looking at
That's what
all
I
the
thought.
old,
I,
yeah, there's just
I,
too much red on the bridge.
that's what I thought and everything. You know, just like, you know, how we see in Generations, when Picard beamed down to, you know, the planet, he didn't have his communicator. It's like, what happened to that? Did his communicator get lost in transport? But we saw him have it when he stepped on the transporter pad. We all know what happened behind the scenes. It was left at the studio. They literally forgot his communicator. But that's just one of my little tropes with, you know, it's like, oh, Worf is the captain. He's wearing, you know, captain's pit, but he's wearing a gold, you know, gold colors. So what does that mean?
It means that Worf at heart is still a rebel. But no, I love the Worf that we saw in Picard season 3. And you know, shout out to Michael Dorn. You know, he's barely aged, and I am very jealous of that. You know, in or out of his Klingon makeup, you know, he is aged beautifully. He really has. Or should I say, he's barely aged beautifully. But no, the Worf we saw in season 3 of Picard, I mean, when he went in there and, you know, off with their heads sort of thing, I was just like, yeah, he's back. It was like a really big highlight for me because I felt like he was missed in the show. And I mean that little thing between him and Raffi when they were looking for that guy, and then he just turned around and he said the headings are on Wednesdays, and I'm just like, yes, we have to have a set day for them. Even though it was all, you know, like peaceful with his chamomile tea and you know, all that jazz, he was still himself at heart. And I love that. But the way that he was preaching about, you know, like no violence and that, and then Riker was just like, we're all gonna die. That for me was just like, yeah, you are. And then I'm just like, but you know, because it's still Worf at heart, regardless of, you know, how much of a peace-loving hippie he is turned into, you know, or the Klingon variety anyway. He's still a warrior at heart, and he is still more than capable. It was just so lovely because going right back from like episode 1 of TNG, his story arc, and then right to Picard season 3, his evolution, in my opinion, was on par with Data's evolution, but for very different reasons. You know, I will admit, Worf will always have a piece of my heart. He will, because he is a warrior, but he evolved to a point of he didn't become a pacifist in any way, shape, or form, but he started looking at the world differently. He started looking at himself differently. He needed to find a place of peace. And he went on a journey to find that peace. And he did. But when it came to his family, no holds barred. And he fought for his family.
Mm-hmm.
He fought for that peace that he had searched for so long. And he fought to maintain it. Not just for himself, but for his family, for the Federation, for the galaxy. And that is something to be very, very proud of. Of everything he went through, the losses he suffered, the shit life threw at him from one minute to the next. He still remained him at his core, and nothing could take that away from him. And he still upheld all of his values. he still fought for his family. He's a bit of an inspiration. If you think about it, really, yes, he did. He did spend time there. It's a beautiful journey that he had, heartbreaking. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Everything that he was put through, but he fought through it. He still kept a lot of hope. No, and sweet dreams, darling. Mwah.
Take care.
He came out on the other side stronger than ever because he always had that hope there, and he always had the values that he'd always upheld. He never let go of any of that. He just basically he did a lot of soul searching.
You know, Esri said it best. You know, she said he is one of the most honorable people that she has ever met.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to Klingons, especially Klingons and stuff. You know, Worf, and you could see this too when him and Jadzia got married. How traditionalist a Klingon he is. You know, he wanted, you know, he wanted to follow all of these Klingon traditions and stuff and everything. He was a traditionalist Klingon at heart, but it wasn't, you know, he may have that traditionalist, but he wasn't one to be very radical or fundamental ways of like what he said in the ways of the warrior. You know, if my people have gone back to the old ways, like, you know, of Klingon, of the way the Klingons believe that they are not so much like the change, not like the changeling who sought out to enslave things. Klingons conquer. I almost don't want to see the difference in between the enslavement and conquering. But like the Klingons, they are warrior race. They, you know, as Gowron said, you know, we conquer others. You know, we don't just actually beat our friends and stuff like that. We conquer our enemies. We conquer others and stuff and everything. Worf didn't have that way about him, about the conquering way. He had a traditionalist of a Klingon about like upholding Klingon principles and Klingon ideals and stuff and everything. But he didn't he didn't go out to start, you know, conflicts and stuff and everything. Of course, we saw how he, you know, the Klingon martial arts that we've seen in TNG, then go over to DS9 and stuff. It was something interesting to watch, you know, him perform and everything. And that's one of the things too that separates Worf in a little different way than we've seen that Klingons are supposed to be, you know, battle centric readiness and stuff and everything else. They ready to shed blood. You remember doing the oh shoot, the Civil War, the Klingon Civil War.
Redemption.
You know, where yes, it was during the Civil War where the capital city was neutral ground. You know, they're not supposed to kill each other, but like outside, they was gonna, you know, one side was Gowron, one side was the Duras family and stuff and everything. And you know, all they did was fight and drink, fight, drink, and eat. You know, and stuff, and you know, that's the whole central thing about Klingon culture and stuff. Somebody mentioned earlier too that Klingons, if you do remember, it was in the TNG episode, I want to say suspect or circumstantial, if I'm not mistaken. Suspicion, where they had Dr. Crusher about a bunch of scientists on board the Enterprise, including the Ferengi, you know, that developed
Dr. Rega.
Dr. Rega, who developed, you know, a metaphasic shielding, which protects a ship that can go inside of a star's corona. It gives it that layer of protection that it won't burn up and everybody be killed by the radiation and stuff. It was interesting. and one of the scientists was a Klingon female. In Beverly's report, she was stating that Klingons don't have a high, high standards for science, especially their scientists, and stuff and everything. Because she said she was a warp field specialist on the Klingon homeworld, and I guess you could say Klingons, in a sense, don't look at science in a warrior type way.
Oh,
You
okay, Travis? Maybe not.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can't hear you now.
I can hear you fine.
Yeah, you
Okay.
you froze for me, so I wasn't sure what was going on there.
Okay. No, I was just saying that there are Klingons that pursue the field of science that doesn't fit that whole warrior mode, but they still do have that sense of honor and stuff and everything. But like I said, that Klingons don't have too much bright of a on scientists, especially Klingon scientists and stuff. Even though they know they need people to make their ship, build their ship, make their weapons to to enhance to forward their technology. We all know, guess what? It was the Romulans who developed cloaking technology in the part of the galaxy. The Klingons basically got that from the Romulans when they had a alliance with the Romulans. It was the Klingons. They did not create their cloaking technology. I remember when the Dahar Master Core. He said cloaking technology at that time, during Crux time was new. It was just a very handful full of people that actually knew how they work in the Empire and stuff and everything.
I'm sorry, I know this is like slightly off topic, but something's just gone off like a light bulb in my brain with some of that Travis has just said. But you were saying about the Klingons getting their cloaking technology off the Romulans.
Yes.
Why did the Borg never take advantage of cloaking technology? Was it because they were just too arrogant and up their own asses to give a crap? Thinking that they were too high and mighty? Because, logically speaking, the Borg could have taken out humanity if they'd have took advantage of cloaking technology.
Technology requires a lot of power from what I understand, the science behind the cloaking technology. When the cloaking shield is up, basically the ship becomes invisible, but not like from since like in any enemy fire, but yet it requires a lot of energy and a lot of power to power every to make sure the cloaking device is able to cloak every square inch or millimeter or whatever you want to say of a ship. Now, with that said, it required power. I don't know if you could say the Borg could find a workaround because the Klingons, we all seen in Star Trek 6, a bird of prey fired when it was cloaked. So that kind of technology, in a sense, because I'm sure the Borg have assimilated the technology itself, but they never implemented in their technological use. And you do ask a good question. You asked a good question, Katie, about that. You would think that would be a weapon, a type of defensive weapon for the Borg, but the Borg also uses transwarp coils, which requires a lot of power as well.
I do understand that. However, the reason why I'm asking, obviously, cloaking technology, it does require, like you said, it requires a hell of a lot of power. There are like downsides to it. However, as we saw in First Contact, yes, the cubes are absolutely massive. They are, yeah, they are like, woo. However, when that cube got destroyed, a little skitsy sphere just popped out of it. So you would have thought that if like these huge cubes could hold smaller Borg vessels, why not? Like, do you know if like they're like going into battle, going to conquer a very resistant species like humanity? Why not send big cubes like they did, but more than one? Because come on, we're going to put up a good fight, especially if Picard's, in the fight. And then the smaller vessels that can be carried within the cubes, whether it's the spheres, smaller little dinky cubes, or those like we saw that one in Voyager that was like a different shape. It wasn't a cube.
Almost like not a diamond shape, but it was almost like I know what you're talking about. It was funky. It was funky looking.
Yeah, it was kind of like in the shape of a torpedo, really. Like one of the Starfleet torpedoes, just a little bit more angular. Now the Queen's vessel, that was like a diamond shape, and it was the only Borg vessel that was purple, and that is because purple is the color of royalty historically. So that's why they did that. But these smaller vessels that could be contained within the cubes, why not equip them? Because they're smaller, they don't necessarily need transport coils neither. If they can be carried inside the bigger vessels, why not equip them with cloaking technology to give them the added advantage against very resistant species?
That's a good topic for another episode because it kind of detracts from our conversation of Worf. So that is a very good question.
Now, like I said, I do apologize for that, but I blame Travis for putting that in my head. I love you.
So you gonna throw me up under the warp core? Okay.
Yeah.
But one episode that I wanted to bring up, and we kind of like touched upon it, is we definitely get to see a bit of Worf's stubborn streak, especially in the episode Ethics from season 5 of Next Generation, where the barrel fell off the shelf and crushed his spine. That's
bad. That.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics that I think Dr. Russell was the scientist that came to try and pitch the idea of growing him a new spine and all that, but it kind of shows how deep set Worf is in his belief in Klingon culture and whatnot. Just like when a warrior's been debilitated in such a manner, ritualistic suicide is the way to go, which we did see later on in Sons of Mogh in DS9 when Kern went to him saying, "I want you to kill me." So it kind of flipped the script a little bit, even though that Kern wasn't debilitated physically, he was no longer a warrior when Worf sided with the Federation.
Yeah. Throw this in there too. Chancellor, because we know him at the time he was General Martok, but Chancellor Martok, after we seen Chancellor Martok he lost an eye. Wouldn't that fit into that whole thing of Klingon pride about so if there is something that's if part of you turns out to be usefulness, it means that you're no much of a warrior. You should kill yourself, just like Worf was basically asking Riker to commit suicide and stuff and everything. And that right there, that's another little thing that I liked about there are Klingon who are, like I said, hardcore traditionalists, which Worf follows. Kind of, he has that, but he starts to learn that the old Klingon ways may not work in the future of the Empire. In the Empire way, you have that mindset, but for them, the progressive being a progressive Klingon is not. I can't say it's a bad thing, but he to me it seemed like he was moving in the progressive way than some of the traditional hardcore like Gowron, who believe that they should they should go back to the old ways of not like making peace with their enemies, conquering their enemies. That's what their hearts set out to do and stuff.
But Derek did actually call out Martok on that when he lost the eye. He's like, "Aren't you guys supposed to kill yourself when something like this happened?" And Martok said, "Not when there's still battles to be fought."
Yes,
He's still standing. He's still able to fight. He just might not be able to see as well. But yeah,
and you know what?
I think it all depends on the circumstances. Because losing an eye, I think it depends on the circumstances. Because losing an eye is very different from losing your back. You know what I mean? If you weigh it up, your back is more important than an eye. I mean, it. But when you lose an eye or lose sight in an eye, you can adapt. If your back crumbles, you need to be grown a new spine, basically. Like replacement body parts are needed. But I mean that episode with the back injury that broke my heart. I actually struggle watching that episode because it's one time when you see Worf extremely vulnerable. But as well, I love that episode because it does give us more of an insight into Klingon belief systems. And just all these little pieces. We've learned more about the Klingon society through Worf than anything else,
And don't forget about Ambassador Kalar too.
Yeah, that was going to be the next episode I want to talk about, reunion. And saying, well, first there was the early episode when they did it, and the reunions when we lost Kalar, but that also kind of shows Worf's more vulnerable side, where he just went all hell. I'm trying to think the right analogy.
About him seeking revenge on Duras.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't act for the Klingon. He just said it was.
He acted like a Klingon, not a Starfleet.
Oh, he really did. Oh no, he took his comm badge off and everything because he was like, this right here. He's like, Starfleet or not. He was like, Federation don't have no business in this and stuff. He went, he challenged Duras, and he was the victor at the end because he was running on pure rage. I mean, he was running on, and then you could tell what really pushed Worf over. I think he could accept Kalar's death, but it was Duras, because Duras and his father was literally the ones that his father betrayed the Empire to the Romulans. That's what happened. Yeah. And when Worf accepted this commendation and everything and stuff, that Kalar's death set off a catalyst, and it's for him inside him, and he just let loose in that.
Yeah, allergies. It's fine. Carry on.
Yeah, see, I've been there the last couple of days. I really feel what you're going through.
No, I cannot see properly out of this eye. It's
that's terrible. Yeah, Worf behaving the way he did in that episode was really something. And then Kalar, she gave us another insight on Klingons. The insight, storytelling, the cultural aspect for us to understanding, the Klingons and stuff and everything else. And then also too, TNG had their Klingon. DS9 had their Klingons. Voyager had her Klingon. In the sense, she was half Klingon, but she was a Klingon hybrid human. But she
comes in the episode. Was it prophecy?
Huh?
But then comes the episode. Was it prophecy?
I believe that's the name of the episode. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you're talking
And there was this big thing about Balana's unborn child and these Klingons, and that they were dying from a disease. Was it the Narette?
Narette, yep.
about. Yep,
Yes,
yep,
go me for memory. Sorry.
yep.
Sorry, I get so excited when I remember things. But you know that there was that was another side of a Klingon belief system, and actually we did learn a little bit from Balana as well, even though she like tried to reject her Klingon half. But you know in all honesty, there's been Klingons all over Trek. I don't think you can get away with not having them in it because they are so popular, as controversial as they are. You know, but I love Klingon centered episodes. I mean, I can't remember what the episode's called again. My memory, but it was a two-parter, and it's centered around Worf and Data. Data started dreaming, and Worf went off to find his daddy.
That's right.
That's right.
And you all
Yes,
froze.
yes, that's the one. But we learned a bit more. Was it about the Kidama? I can't remember.
I'm losing the internet, guys.
What
Hold on.
happened? Okay, darling. But
I know what you're talking about, Katie. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're getting at.
we learn a bit more about that battle, and we saw Klingons living in harmony with Romulans, but because of that, they'd lost the core of who they were, and Worf was just having none of it. And I loved how he was teaching them, and he took that boy out on a hunt to bring food to the table like a Klingon. And this is this is after he'd been excommunicated and he'd been through all that. He was still able to reintroduce what like the core of being a Klingon to a new generation who had no idea. And that moment for me for Worf was huge because he also made the elders remember who they were.
Did you guys figure out the episode? Because my internet kept on.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And that was a really huge thing for Worf. Even though he never found his father, he discovered the truth. But in order to keep peace and to bring no other Klingon families dishonor and no more dishonor to his own, he kept their secret.
Yes, he did.
And it was a very tough decision for him to make, but he knew he was making the right decision, regardless of what the ingrained belief system of Klingons dictated in the back of his mind. And that is actually one of my favorite episodes. But also another one, a DS9 episode, again, for love and money, don't ask me what the episode's called, but they go in search of
Sword of Kahless.
The Sword of Kahless?
Yes, thank you, yes. They go in search of that, and you learn a little bit more about the backstory of that fable. It, and that like little piece of Klingon history. And again, all these little tiny pieces that we learn I mean, don't get me wrong, yeah, there is the thing with B'Elanna and that in Voyager, but the main pieces of what Klingons are, who they are, what they believe, the status of their morality, their life path, the way of the warrior and Stovacor and Grethor and all this lot. We have learned the majority of that through Worf. And it of all the times, I mean, obviously, yeah, TOS, like there was Klingons in that, there were warriors, but there was never anything too deep about them. So, having Worf in the limelight and as a viewer learning through him was absolutely wonderful. And yeah, so he will always have a piece in my heart for that, because I find Klingons fascinating. I always have done. He makes them seem. He makes us see Klingons for who and what they are, not just a race who's always looking for a fight. Because that is how Klingons, people think of Klingons like, oh yeah, they're always looking for a fight. When, yeah, some of them are, but as an entire race, they're not actually looking for a fight. But if one presents itself, they're going to go for it, and they're going to do it with pride. They're going to bring honor to themselves, their families, their home, their world, and whether that is in victory or death, they will do that. But a lot of people don't see that. They just see, oh yeah, Klingons, they're volatile, they're always looking for a fight. They bask in the death of their enemies, which they do. They revel in victory and the blood of their enemies. But that there's so much more to them than that. And we've only seen that because of Worf. Because I believe that if Worf wasn't that, like, if Worf's character wasn't created and stuck on the bridge of the Enterprise, I don't think we would have been able to have learned all this about Klingons, or not as deeply. But because of that character on the bridge of the flagship, he became like Klingons became even more integrated into the world of Trek, and it was beautiful to see.
Let's see, another aspect of Worf would have to be just like some of the more best way to describe it is awkward moments. Is saying so as being a Klingon warrior, being raised by humans, and he has no freaking clue what it has to do with trying to find true love. And I think the best episode that kind of hits that is Looking for Parmok in All the Wrong Places from season 5 of DS9.
Yes, I love that episode.
With the Lady Grilka just pining away for Quark, even though they got divorced, they're still best buds. And Quark goes to Worf just like, what do I do to win her heart? And Dax, Jadzia, she's totally seeing it. She's like giving Worf all these hints and all that, and he just like whoop, right over the head. It's like totally oblivious.
Yeah.
Until that last part of the episode where she fights him in the holodeck, and And then I think it might have been the same episode or a different episode where actually no, it was the same episode where Dax and Worf go to the infirmary and
Yeah,
poor Julie, and he just like, nope, I don't want to know. La 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 la
Yeah.
la. I'm not hearing this.
yeah, I absolutely love that episode. It's so funny in so many ways, and
Hmm.
the way it's handled, it's quite it is quite amusing how it was done, but it was done very well. And then when there was the malfunction with the interface, um,
And Quark
Quark
does
had to
Quark.
stall. Yeah, Quark had to stall, and like you said, Dave, he had to like Quark doing Quark, but then in like in the in on the other side of things, that there was Jadzia and Worf, um, they were. I can't look. Were they like arguing or something? And then the argument just turned into a big bout of passion. If I'm remembering that wrong, forgive me. I haven't actually seen
I
that
think
episode in a while.
I think you're kind of pretty close to spot on with that.
Yeah, but I'm sure they were having a disagreement of something, and Jadzia was like provoking Worf in some way, shape, or form, and then they ended up having at it basically. Um, but yeah, and then like the like
Hi,
building on
Shar.
what Shannon said.
Worf, if I remember this correctly, Worf was showing off, with his batless skill, but he was showing off in a sense why he was connected with Quark and stuff and everything else. And Jazia called him out and said, you just, just do what you're supposed to do what you have to do without showing off. He was being a show off
Yeah,
in his
he was.
batless
He
skill.
was. He was.
And even though like Jadzia called him out, it's like I was not showing up. It's like, yeah, you were, dude. Yeah, you were.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's why they ended up having a bit of a bicker that turned into that bout of passion. But I mean, honestly, when they went into the infirmary, the look on Julian's face, I'm sorry, but he was just because didn't Worf and was it Grilka?
Mhm.
Quark and Grilka, sorry, didn't they go in a very similar state? And like you had these like two couples who weren't really couples who had gone into the infirmary more or less at the same time, bloodied and bruised, basking in the after effects, and Julian's just like
Nope. Not.
his face was a picture, and I still laugh every single time I watch that episode. I still laugh at the look on Julian's face, and it's like Dave said, he's just like, "No, I don't want to know. I don't want to know." But yeah, that was quite an amusing episode.
It was. But yeah, welcome, Shar. I don't know if you joined us late, but yeah, we kind of touched base a little bit with Kern, just the heartbreaking loss that Worf had to make to retain Kern's honor by essentially erasing who he was.
His identity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the last time we heard of Kern. He must have lived on as an old Klingon man, or he died during the Dominion War with when the Klingons and the Federation was fighting the Dominion or something. No one knows, because that's the last time we ever heard of Kern and stuff and everything. There's one thing too about Worf, if y'all remember too. This was when they went to the pleasure planet Risa.
Mm-hmm.
Worf was telling Jadzia about a story when he was younger. I don't know if he was playing, as the
Soccer,
world say,
football.
but we Americans call it football or soccer. we we he was saying that there was one person that gave him a challenge, and he was going on. I'm not gonna make the long story because I'm just paraphrasing and stuff and everything else. But Worf said he leaped up, and I guess he, both of the boys went for
The
the
ball.
ball, and something happened. They collided, and
Oh, yeah,
when Worf,
didn't they?
They butted heads.
but Worf did not know it. Worf did not know it because he's a Klingon, and Klingons. This is what I'm paraphrasing. I'm not for sure. Vulcans are twice as stronger than humans in Star Trek, where Klingons is about 3 or 4 times stronger than humans. So Vulcans have a denser cranial structure than humans. Their skeletal structure is denser,
Hardier.
and they have
Stronger.
and they just they're built for, as we say, a warrior. They were built for something in a needs to say. But in that, when Wolf was telling Jazia the story, he said he realized just how fragile humans are to him, and he had to be careful when interacting in such a way with humans and stuff and everything, because he didn't understand. He didn't, when he was a kid, he didn't understand just how strong he were compared to even older kids. He was stronger than older kids, and even like 3 or 4 times, whether 3 or 4 years older than him, he still was stronger than him and stuff and everything. And that was another little trope that we got back of
And,
Worf's
and,
past.
and originally that story actually originated in beta canon. I think with the I think it was called the Star Trek Starfleet Academy, ironically, which kind of, or Young Adventures or something like that, where it kind of like looked at the principal Next Generation characters when they were in the academy, and Worf's story was ripped off of that originally.
I'm glad
But
it was brought into Alpha, because that see, when I first saw that episode, I was having a very difficult time when I saw that episode, when he told Jadzia that story, and I was really over emotional that day, and I cried my heart out when Worf told that story.
and of course, with the storm going on outside, kind of just added a little oomph for that story.
Yeah, and but that story does really hit me in the feels even now, even when I'm having a very non-emotionally volatile day. It still hits me in the feels, because even though he knew where he came from, he just wanted to be and even though he was set apart, he wanted to be involved. He wanted to make friends. And after that, it. I mean, that'd be enough to scar a child for life. He had it a lot rougher than people realize, especially after hearing that story. But Worf is very stoic, as are a lot of Klingons. But one thing that I notice about a lot of Klingons is they complain a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean a hell of a lot, more so than Cardassians, actually. But they complain a lot about the stupidest little things. I mean, I know that, like, when us lot get together, we have a good rant, we have a good complain about whatever it is, and like, even like have a good rant and complain about
Sorry
things
for the
in
noise
Trek.
outside.
But they really do whine about
do.
something. And whereas Worf, it's very rare that he complains. He is probably one of the most stoic Klingons I've come across.
I'm gonna try
But
and shut
he
it. I'll see if I
carries
can.
it very calmly as well. Even when he's in the midst of battle, he keeps that stoic calm. And he's, in some ways, he is a very atypical Klingon, because even when he has that bloodlust for battle, he does have that level of calm, and he can be very Vulcan in some ways, in that sense, because of his stoicism. Yeah, it can like really get into the battle and like really like get his Klingon hat on, so to speak. But there's a lot of times when he's in battle where he is so calm, it's unsettling. And he's just swinging his bat'leth or his blade, whatever he's using, he's swinging his fists, and he's doing it so calmly. It's like watching Swan Lake Klingon style. He flows into his movements like he's doing Tai Chi, and his face can barely change sometimes. Don't get me wrong, other times he is like full on Klingon warrior. He's all growly and teeth bared, and he has like two very separate sides to himself, even within the same situations. And when he's that like calm, slowy, stoic Worf, he employs that the majority of the time within his life, within his like carrying out his duty. And even within his relationship with Jadzia, even when he was like proper pissed at her for something, he was still like so calm about it. And it was just, yeah, he was very unsettling with his calmness and how centered he was for a Klingon. And that's why I say that sometimes it can be a little Vulcan in my eyes, because for a Klingon, he should not be that calm. And this was before, the peace-loving hippie in Picard season 3. But yeah, for a Klingon, he should not be that calm. And I actually take my hat off to his parents for that, because I'm sure that comes from them.
Not to get too off subject at hand, but this still follows into the whole Klingon about Worf Klingon and stuff like what you were saying and everything. In Voyager, do you guys remember? I believe it was season 4, and it was Random Thoughts.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, Random Thoughts. If y'all remember the episode Random Thoughts, where B'Elanna and Janeway was on an alien planet. They were looking for a piece for B'Elanna to use in, I guess, something that in engineering that she had to, and they was using currency, and they didn't understand currency and stuff like that. But somebody bumped into her.
Yeah.
Basically, to us would be like, "Oh, okay, excuse me, I'm sorry." It kind of hurt her. She kind of got a little angry, but in her mind, she was like, "It's okay, no problem." But
yeah,
it was all set up, because that in that society, they basically said that they purged all violent thoughts. Violent thoughts in that society, what made what brings in war and stuff and everything. So there was a conspiracy to draw out one of B'Elanna's violent thoughts, so it can get passed around, so everybody can experience a violent thought in that society. Well, in that episode, it showed too, because it goes into Tuvok. It goes into about Tuvok's Vulcan violent nature too. That
Mhm.
The Klingons and Vulcans have some very violent thoughts.
Yes.
Klingons don't repress their violent thoughts. Vulcans, they do whatever they can to suppress those violent thoughts and
Yeah.
stuff. And Valana, even Tuvok said too, and so he started working with her because he was like, he kind of looked at her like, your thoughts could be a security risk to this ship if we run into a species like that and stuff. We don't need your impulse firing thoughts, here and stuff like that. Yes,
Yeah.
we don't need that firing stuff like that on our way back to the Alpha Quadrant and stuff. So you look at that, Klingons, if you get inside their thoughts and stuff and everything else in their head and stuff and everything, you be like, man, y'all. I mean, we knew they were violent and stuff, and they controlled in some ways. But because if you punch a Klingon with an open fist, I think that means you challenging
Initiated a
them.
mating. I thought that was they were trying to initiate a mating ritual.
Yeah, initiating mating ritual. If you do, a closed fist or like something like that, that's something. I think that's something else and everything else. I know if you throw a knife on the table, you initiating a challenge or something. But needs to say,
Challenge to the death.
Klingons, they have some very violent thoughts. Now, real quick, let's talk about Worf when he in TNG, where he basically regressed to an earlier form of what we would be called, Cro-Magnon-mans, or what do you want to call them, Neanderthals. Worf was some sort of spider-like creature in
No, that
that.
Barclay's Barclay's the one that turned into a spider. Worf turned into a proto Vulcan or proto Klingon.
Yeah, like a
Yeah,
proto,
he was
but
like
it still had a
a
shell.
beast.
It had like a
Predator.
shell, like some sort of like a shell or something. And it was just like, if that's what Klingons evolved out of, and came from, and everything else. Ugh, I mean, we're no pretty, but yeah, I mean, our ancestors were no pretty, 30,000 years ago or so. But oh my God, jeez Louise, the
Yeah.
Klingons, what they looked like 30,000 years ago. Ooh.
Well, but kind of go back to what Shar mentioned a little bit ago on in the chat, is that asking what happened to Dave Meir, since my name's Dave Prime, and saying through our parent show Dangerous Thoughts, I was the first of, I want to say, 4 Daves that were in the chat, but I think it was Manu that gave me the monkey ear of Dave Prime. So
Yes, it was.
that's where the Dave Prime comes from. So I was first.
But yeah, we don't talk about Meredith because he's straight.
What?
Yeah, we don't talk about Dave Mirror because he's straight.
Oh.
Same as Mirror Travis and Mirror Tyson. They don't like to admit it, but there's a universe out there where they are straight.
Say what? Well, it sounds
Katie
like
is you know what? In some mirror universe, Katie is a nun.
Yes.
Dave, did I break you?
And I'm sure that in
Oh,
one
my
universe,
Lanta.
I'm fucking straight as well. But it's sickable to think of. But
Well, he was just totally
I'm
redlining that thing out there.
I'm a very big believer in. I mean, I'm sure in one universe, Worf's a Vulcan. I'm sure in one universe, Picard's a Romulan. I believe in the multiverse theory, and I do believe that every possibility happens in whatever universe. So
Well, in one universe, Kirk's a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah, see, because they actually got a comic series that they gender swapped the entire TOS crew. Well, Kelvin TOS crew, I should say.
Mm-mm-mm.
But yeah, you know,
Mm-mm-mm.
I mean, could you imagine Worf as a Vulcan?
That's a scary
In a
thought.
way, I could. In a way, I could because of what I've previously said about him.
Could you imagine Klingons actually like tribbles?
The-
Oh, could you imagine just seeing Worf snuggled up with a tribble with a blanket and a book? Oh, that'd be glorious to see.
Oh. The
Although
Klingon
the
Empire will
scariest
not
thought,
destroy the whole planet of tribbles.
Hmm.
oh no, the scariest thought is that in one universe, Worf's a Ferengi.
Oh dear God.
Oh, man.
Now that is a scary thought.
Very,
Yeah.
very. Worf be a female. Did we say that? Worf,
I don't think
Worf
it's
be a
more
female?
specifically, but yeah, there are comics that have gender swapped people. I'm not sure if they've done any Next Generation cast, but
Yeah, Worf as a female. Man, oh man, that would be interesting. Knockers would be pretty decent, huh?
But Worf has also traversed the multiverse.
yes.
He's jumped from one to the other. And
Oh, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. That episode specifically.
yeah.
I mean, he's out
And
there saying, "You could all suck my ridges."
but no, it's you know, like speaking of the multiverse, you know, he's traversed it. That was one wild ride.
Yeah, sure. That was the episode we talked about.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
I
yep.
want to say about
Yeah,
6 weeks
Um,
ago, roughly.
yeah.
yeah, I don't know
That was
how
a good
regularly you watch our show, chat, but I don't really know many episode names. I'm a bad Trekkie in that sense. But that episode that showed a lot of different sides to Worf, quite literally. But it showed a Worf with more emotion, and I liked that because you don't really see him showing much emotion, whereas in that episode you do. And he goes through the rainbow of emotions, uncertainty. We see his lovey-dovey side a little bit, and it is sadness and everything, and that is a very
Firstborn.
mm, but that for me is one of the. Now, a lot of people disagree with me on this. I don't expect either of you to agree. But for me, that is one of the best Worf episodes because you do get to see so many different sides to him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not just for the fact
Check
that
your text, Dave.
What's that?
Your phone. Check your phone.
Already did.
Okay.
I would say,
not just because he's traversing the multiverse, like, and you literally see different sides of him.
yeah,
But
and not only that, I think it just this season of Picard, this last season of Picard, kind of hit it on the head that Worf did become a pacifist.
Mhm.
Saying so,
yeah, but
He
not
must went back
whole.
to, he must went back to Boroth.
possibly.
Meditate.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure. I mean,
But
if you're feeling bold, I mean, the YouTube description below, you can pop on to click on the StreamYard link and join us live in the chat if you so decide. But I mean, if you want to just do the chat on YouTube, that works fine too. Oh yeah, say he'll war bonking his head in the bunk when you say, I don't know about Deep Space Nine, but you still report on time for work, dude.
Yeah, I love that. That never fails to make me giggle. There was another part of insurrection that two other parts that made me laugh in relation to Worf. The zit on his nose.
It wasn't a zit, it was a
Um,
gorch.
yeah, and then when they're fleeing into the cave, and is phaser rifle goes dead, so he basically swings it like a baseball bat to take out one of the drones, and then he just turns around and he's just got this like big like grin on his face. He's like, definitely feeling aggressive tendencies, sir. And that was just a beautiful moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Data just kind of like he's blatantly lying, but
But no, there's been a lot of funny moments with Worf, considering who he is, what he is. You know, there's been a lot of fun and humour around him. Like, there's been a lot of hardship. There's been a lot of emotion surrounding Worf, like from us, the viewers. But when you see like in Insurrection, you know that there's a lot of humor surrounding him. He really, Michael Dorn really plays into that as well. And you know, you do get to you do get to see Worf joining in with humor. And it is lovely. Like all of these different sides to him. There's so many people that are like, oh, that's very out of character for Worf. Yeah, no, it ain't. It's just very rare that we see it. But if you look closely, that's always been there. The pacifist within him has always been there as well, in all honesty. And that's why he went on this big soul-searching mission. Journey, sorry. But he is still a Klingon at heart. And it's like I said earlier, regardless of how much of the Klingon version of a peace-loving hippie he becomes, when it comes to the people he cares about, his friends, people he classes as family, he would still die for them. And he would still fight for them. He would still kill for them. And that is what I love about him. He is still himself at his core, despite everything. It didn't really affect his peaceful journey. He put that on hold. He still kept that peace within him, but he just like told it to take a step back so he could sort his family out, and then he returned to that once his baser nature, shall we say, wasn't needed anymore. And yeah, I have a lot of respect for Worf as a warrior, as a man, as an officer, and for the journey he took on that quest for peace.
Same, but yeah, Shar, yeah, you definitely brought up a good point there. Say that, and considering right now, say where I don't have the same Monday commitments that I had before for the last 6 months, say when we get this done, I'm going to work on getting these old episodes uploaded to Spotify in hopes that can generate more subscriptions, more likes, and all that. So, I mean, if you are enjoying this this, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. We're here every Monday at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 Eastern, unless something weird happens. But again, starting on July 21st, I believe is the date on the calendar. Let me pull up the calendar of my phone. If I see.
And just for anyone
Yeah.
who's watching across my side of the pond, it's 1 a.m. for us Tuesday morning.
Yeah, but yeah, July 21st. So in 3 weeks, we're going to start talking new episodes with Strange New Worlds, and I believe we're going to be doing a double episode because they're airing the first 2 episodes on Thursday the 17th. So that gives us a couple of days to watch it before we talk about it. So some podcasts, I love them to death. Strange New Pod, I love their show. They do that every Thursday, and say that I need more time to watch it. Sometimes I'll watch it, and then I'll watch their podcast. But I have a bowling on Thursdays now, so yeah, I think I'm slowly getting better. I'm not perfect at bowling, but I'm getting better at it. I need to get one of those little wrist things for bowling to help because I keep on hooking it too much.
What's the date of what's the date of our first Strange New Worlds episode? Sorry.
July 21st. So 3 weeks from today.
Right. Right.
And
Okay.
saying so because I had a couple episodes lined up for talking character profiles. And I added one too many, so whoops. So I'm gonna have to redo the graphics for all those episodes. But was there any other big Worf moments either you wanted to bring up? Because I think I'm kind of running out of ideas.
Oh,
yes.
Worf the midwife.
Oh, oh my God! How can we forget about Disaster? Oh, that is probably one of the best Worf episodes ever. So you are now fully dilated. You're ready to give birth. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I absolutely love that whole Worf Keiko interaction when she's in labour. I'm sorry, that is probably my favourite Worf moment ever because it was a crap situation and he was the only one there. And I mean, I don't think Keiko was too happy about the situation neither. Not just the fact that she was giving birth in the mess hall in front of God knows how many people, but that her midwife was Worf, basically. I actually think they made a pretty good team. It was hilarious. It was just the way he was. He was very much. And he was so emotionless throughout the whole thing, but he was still giving her encouragement in his own way. And I mean, I know from experience being a birthing partner for a woman, it's not an easy task because that woman will bite your head off. She will shout at you. She will scream at you. She'll probably curse at you with everything that she can muster, So, I mean, I can only imagine, like, obviously the little bits that were not shown throughout the birth, because it did, like, cut off at one point to go to another scene, I think. But, I can only imagine what Keiko threw at him. And with him being who he is, he'd have taken that on the head. He'd have just, he'd have taken it with a pinch of salt. Sorry. He was brilliant. And I need to go watch that episode again. I think I'm gonna give up my my writing for the night after this, and
Yeah.
then go watch that episode because that is like my favorite Worf scene. Um, it was I can only imagine the behind the scenes laughs that were happening because of that scene. It was yeah, history in the making.
Yeah, same. So now that I finally found one, gotta have it, gotta pull it up there just because I can.
Yeah.
It's just the look in her eyes, just like she is just like full blown, like in character. She is very oh, what's the word I'm thinking of? Wow, why am I blanking on it all of a sudden?
She made it very believable.
But
You know, she made it
there's
real.
a word for it. Say push, Keiko, push. Push.
I
Like
am pushing.
Mm. But but I mean, Keiko did acknowledge the role that Worf played. Oh, let's see. Let's see. Um, why am I?
Didn't he become the baby's godfather or something?
No, she. The part of Molly's name actually has Worf's name in it. Let's see here. Just trying to see if I can pull it up here. Uh, oh, good grief. Let's see. Let's see what Memory Alpha says. If this stupid ad gets out of the way. Yeah, that I mean, just with not so much with Molly, but it's like the Klingon children, they grow up fast because even though that, yeah, just like Alexander, he's a teenager in Deep Space Nine, even though he's still very much a preteen for the most part. When you look at the 365-day calendar.
Travis, are you going, darling?
Yeah. I got something. I got something to do because it's a little after 10 here, and I want to do it before I get myself settled here within the next hour and a half before I head to bed and
Okay,
stuff.
well, I think we're gonna just call it good for right now. And say went for a good 2 hours, so yay. So we'll just close it out. But it's like say next week we're still gonna stick with Nog for the next character profile that we're gonna do. Saying that we're talking about well-rounded characters in the franchise. Worf being one of them. Nog definitely being one of them, going from juvenile delinquent to Starfleet lieutenant by the time the Deep Space Nine ended. It's what we leave behind, or what you left
Yeah.
behind.
What we leave behind.
Right. Yeah, same. But see, we might even like tap into a little bit from the documentary about what a hypothetical season 8 would have brought us as if we didn't lose the actor Aaron Eisenberg far too soon. We've lost too
Yeah.
many actors from Deep Space Nine already in its short tenure. We still got original cast members that are still alive and kicking, but I mean they're starting to fall off, unfortunately. But I mean it's the show's next year's going to be 60 years. They're saying so to have any of the surviving cast members still alive is amazing to say of itself.
It is absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, there's only a few surviving members from the TOS. None of the TNGs have passed on already, but we've
Mm,
seen a few in DS9. Voyager's still around. Enterprise is still
mhm.
around. But like you
Very
said,
well.
the whole trek. I mean, these character, the
My
people,
job
the
out.
actors that came about. You know, if it's one of those things where you look at it and you be like, you appreciate you appreciate the characters that they brought to the television for us
Mhm.
to sit back and enjoy this fantasy that that we came to love and came to really admire and stuff and everything. But we also come to the age of time and stuff and everything. Unfortunately, some have medical ailments, like Aaron Eisenberg. I mean,
Rene
it's
Auberginois.
that
Yeah.
Renee Aubergine. Yeah.
See,
I mean,
r-
these guys. I mean, it's and then Avery Brooks. Nobody has seen him in almost 2 decades. I don't think.
yeah. Well, I mean,
I haven't seen. I haven't seen him
he
in
did do the documentary that Shatner put together, but yeah, he's largely
I
dipped away
remember
from
that.
the
I remember
spotlight.
that. But yeah, I have not seen, and there's not been. I mean, he's like he stepped away, you know, from the acting. I think
Yeah, because
after his tenure with it, he stepped away.
yeah, he kind of got blacklisted from the way I understand things, which is not cool in any way, shape, or form. But what were you saying, Katie? Someone else, major Trek alum that's
Well,
passed?
even though she made her debut in TOS, I'm sure she did anyway. We know her better from TNG, and then she went on to DS9. Majel Barrett
Oh yes, she passed
and Roxana
back in
Troy.
'09. Yeah,
She is more famous for her role, like for TNG, and then moving on to DS9. But
but
it,
principal
it is
cast
it is
members though. Well, then again,
yeah. But she was a very popular character, even
mhm,
though she was only in like, I mean, she was the computer voice for
not
three
early on,
series
but
for three series of Star Trek. She was the voice of the computer, so she,
and
you know,
and she did the voice of the computer for the '09 Trek reboot as well. That was her last credit was before she got that all cut before she passed.
but yeah, and I mean, obviously, I remember her most from TNG, even though she
Ditto.
made an appearance or two in DS9. She had more appearances in TNG. That's how Luoxana was introduced in TNG. She is one of my favorite, like, tertiary characters, so to speak.
Oh,
Um,
and a great foil for Worf.
oh yeah,
Yeah, say
definitely.
because
And
what does this
Um,
button do, Mister Wolf?
and Jean Luc was very skittish around her. But anyway, I'm gonna have to get going, guys.
All right. Well, until next week,
okay.
everybody. Yay,
Yeah.
Spock be with you.
Take care,
Toodles.
everybody.